What happens when a well-meaning neighbor thinks replacing insulin with water is a lesson in resilience? Join my crusade to confront entitlement with cupcakes and creativity. Before we begin today's insane story, show some love if you've ever survived a wild Karen meltdown. Drop a like and let me know your craziest Karen run-in you've had down in the comments. As the dust settled after that spectacular showdown, I couldn't shake off the ear-to-ear grin plastered across my face. Somehow, in the midst of flying cupcakes and thunderous laughter, the tight bonds of our community had transformed into an unbreakable fortress of support. Neighbors approached me with renewed vigor, sharing their favorite anecdotes from the night. "Did you see Karen's face when that cupcake narrowly missed her?" One mom chuckled, clutching her sides as if she were about to burst. A dad from 3 houses down chimed in. "I swear I saw her turn 10 shades of red. You'd think she'd just been served a politically incorrect birthday cake or something." The sweet flavor of shared laughter was almost as good as any confectionery treat, and I reveled in it as if it were a delicious frosting atop a freshly baked cake. Ethan, my little tornado of energy, had finally settled down from all the commotion and was glued to my side, practically vibrating with anticipation for further tomfoolery. Lena, with her infectious enthusiasm, suggested we had to celebrate our success with a neighborhood potluck. "Why not throw a rebel feast?" she laughed. "Let's make Karen the unwitting mascot of our rebellion, and I'll whip up a cake labeled the uninvited guest." The entire neighborhood erupted into a symphony of agreement. We were ready to channel our inner culinary artists armed with spatulas and a dash of irreverence. Suddenly, the air filled with ideas as parents rallied to contribute dishes that were unmistakably Karen-free. Dishes inspired by the things we enjoyed, the snacks we craved, and no dainty broccoli decorated with gluten-free nonsense. As the days stretched into a week, the buzz about our potluck grew to epic proportions. Other parents began to share their own quirky cuisine ideas. A gluten-free gummy bear salad, which shockingly only contained actual gummy bears, and an epic sugar rush punch, which was definitely not, and I repeat, definitely not prepared with kale or any dubious health trends. It was shaping up to be a gala of delicious defiance. During the planning sessions, a parent suggested we add Team Karen t-shirts to the mix. After all, how could we forget the wonderful chaos she had thrust upon us? The absurdity of it all was captivating. Our community had embraced the madness and turned it into a raucous celebration of spirit. We embraced our flubs like badges of honor, painting our resilience with colors of laughter and camaraderie. Finally, the day of the potluck dawned clear and bright, with the sun grinning down on us like an enthusiastic teenager at a concert. With tables draped in cheerful, mismatched tablecloths and balloons swaying in the gentle breeze, it felt as if we were hosting a circus. Albeit one with fewer clowns and an excellent cake, the uninvited guest might have just turned into the star attraction. I was busy seizing the moment, dodging elegantly between parents who were setting up their culinary treasures of chaos. And just as the fun momentum was reaching its peak, guess who strolled in with all the fanfare of a brass band? Yup, Karen Thompson, strutting forth like she owned the universe, complete with a new haircut that was somehow both worse and more extravagant than a peacock on parade. "Honestly, I'm just here to make sure this lunacy doesn't spiral too out of control," she declared, whipping off her sunglasses as if they were superhero goggles. Laughter erupted around me, and I couldn't help but stifle the snickers that threatened to explode into an all-consuming fit. She bungled on about how we should consider a juicing revolution instead of that delightful cake. Bless her, it seemed the universe had somehow granted us this uninvited fairy godmother. Family and friends took turns sharing elevated commentary on her remarks, all while enjoying the great spread before us. "What's next, Karen?" A cheeky neighbor shot back. "Are you going to tell us hydration is overrated?" Cue the gasps of disbelief from our makeshift audience. And in true rebellious spirit, we laughed harder than we had all month. Amid the pots and platters, I found myself bursting with joy at the unity we had conjured. Each exchange, every playful barb, solidified the concept that absurdity could lead to resilience. And with Karen hovering nearby, almost as if she were desperately trying to retreat into armchair journalism, I realized we'd turned the entire neighborhood into a magnificent tapestry, interwoven with absurd turns of fate and delicious laughter. I even caught Ethan clutching a plate of gummy bear salad, a devilish smile on his face as he sneakily munched on snack after snack. There was a delightful sense of power in the absurdity we had embraced, a testament to how together we could summon our inner Avengers to confront any chaotic villain around. As I wrapped up the evening, drenched in the glow of camaraderie and delightful insanity, I couldn't help but ponder just how wonderfully ridiculous life could be. It was a night I would cherish forever, a merry reminder of our battle against entitlement. With another look at my son, who seemed genuinely enchanted by our neighborhood's crazy antics, I mused about the tales we'd share about this epic rebellion against a typical suburban menace. Would there be more tales of this Karen chaos popping up every few weeks? What wild adventures awaited us next? One thing was for sure. We'd be ready with laughter, love, and maybe a batch of cupcakes or two for good measure. The chaotic disaster of the morning was in full swing when I, being the responsible parent that I tried so hard to be, raced through the sliding doors of our local ER with my son clutched tightly in my arms. Nurses promptly swarmed us like we were the main act of some tragic circus, my son's sugar levels all but non-existent, and panic ripping through every fiber of my being. One nurse, bless her kind heart, looked me square in the eye and shouted, "What happened?" My answer, the truth, felt too absurd to stand on its own. Karen replaced his insulin with water. I could almost hear the nearby patients whispering, "Oh, honey, not another day in paradise. This one's gonna be juicy." And frankly, they were right. I could practically hear popcorn popping in the background of their mental fairy tales as they awaited the wild tale unfolding in front of them. The nurse who was attending to my son gawked at me like I had just declared I was in a reality TV show called Extreme Parenting Gone Wrong, Karen Edition. "Did you just say Karen replaced his insulin with water?" she asked, eyes wide enough to require a life jacket. "Yes," I exclaimed, motioning grandly as if trying to paint a picture of utter chaos. "She thinks kids are too dependent on medicine and had the audacity to try and teach him a lesson. Like I was walking into the Chicken Little Academy for parenting." My son, meanwhile, was beginning to regain some semblance of color and started to giggle at the crazy faces I was making. "Nurse, didn't anyone ever teach you that water isn't exactly a suitable substitute for insulin?" I asked playfully, trying to lighten the air as things began to calm down. As the medical staff diligently worked to bring my son back from the brink of what was now a Karen-induced incident, I mentally mapped out a plan that would put a stop to our delightful neighborhood menace in spectacular fashion, while my imagination ran wild, crafting elaborate scenarios in which my neighbor somehow ended up washing a fleet of cars with a cloth made from her tattered authority, because of course, I was hunting for poetic justice. It dawned on me that my unconventional route might actually lead somewhere productive. What if we convinced the authorities to step in? Surely replacing insulin with water was a crime, moral and ethical turpitude of the highest order. My heart raced at the thought of possible headlines. Local mom takes down entitled Karen. Medical emergency sparks change. But of course, once the initial adrenaline wore off, the weight of reality sank in like a lead balloon. I called Lena, my confidant and a nurse in her own right, to gather her thoughts over a cup of coffee. After my son was stable, of course. Safety over caffeine, right? Did Karen really think that a little water replacement would lead to character building? She asked incredulously as we pored over the scene from earlier. I erupted in laughter. Can you imagine if that actually worked? Oh sure, 6 months from now, Ethan will come home from school, bragging that running from the dessert table was his new technique for resilience. My mock-serious tone made Lena giggle, until I realized that I needed more than just laughter. We were going to have to strategize, because this Karen was too wild to just let slip away into insignificance. As laughter continued to pepper our conversation, we plotted a scenario where Karen's high-handed tactics might backfire, not just for my sanity, but also for her own accountability levels. Who knew that a vengeful community meeting could unearth such dramatic breakups with entitlement? Maybe we could rally the neighborhood around us, start a Kids Against Karen campaign, Lena suggested, her excitement bubbling at the thought. I held a hand up dramatically. Ethan could design the logo, something fierce and adorable, with a roaring bear and cupcakes, of course. Because who could resist the power of cupcakes and cute animals? It'd be perfect, I exclaimed. After our conversation, we exchanged laughter and unveiled plans to confront this audacity head-on. Fueled by our enthusiasm, we marked our calendars for the neighborhood potluck. Because who doesn't love an excuse to consume copious amounts of potato salad and lament the triumphs of Karen? I could already see it now. The Ethan's Insulin Defense Brigade would take center stage, armed with pamphlets detailing why not replacing insulin with water might solidify your standing in the community, along with cupcakes. We were on a mission, a delightful little crusade to reclaim our neighborhood. Who needs heroes when you have potato salad and determination, right? As the sun dipped low in the sky and food began to be prepped for the showdown of a lifetime, I felt a wave of feverish anticipation wash over me. Surely, once Karen witnessed our brewing plans, she wouldn't stand a chance against the mighty forces gathering in the name of principle and a whole lot of community love. There would be consequences for her ridiculous behavior. Just wait until the neighborhood learned about the foul scoop on water and medicine. Surely the days of living in fear of Karen were numbered, and I couldn't wait to see where this crusade would lead us all next. What do you think she'll do when she gets the memo? As I sat contemplating the impending showdown at the neighborhood potluck, my mind raced with thoughts of grandeur and chaos. I imagined Karen bursting through the doors, her tailored blouse billowing dramatically behind her, looking for all the world like a disheveled civil servant stepping into hostile territory. There we would be, a brigade of sugar-fueled children armed with inventive slogans, pamphlets, and, most importantly, an assortment of impressive baked goods. I could see it now. Stay sweet, kids! The insulin is not a drink, emblazoned across a vivid banner, crafted meticulously, and with more enthusiasm than skill, by my little artist Ethan. Who knew that sugar could be such a unifying force against such audacity? I mean, it certainly wasn't a typical Monday night in the suburbs, that's for sure. When the day of the potluck arrived, the air buzzed with an energy that felt charged with mischief. Neighbors piled into the community center, like ants to a picnic spread, dragging hot dishes and homemade desserts ready to share stories and sly gossip. It was the quintessential setting for a showdown. Everyone was present to enjoy food and good company. But beneath that innocent guise lay the undercurrents of judgment poised to erupt. Ethan, remember, if anyone mentions insulin, just say you're promoting a water diet, I muttered conspiratorially to my son, who grinned back with enough enthusiasm to make anyone think that water was obviously his favorite beverage. Little did he know the humor we intended to wield. The kids, led by Ethan, busied themselves with an impromptu art station I had set up, crafting cartoonish posters that depicted Karen in various superhero-like positions, as if she was both the villain and an unintentional captain for our cause. Look, Dad, I made her zumbing in front of water bottles, Ethan said, holding up a hand-drawn caricature of Karen in full flail mode, her arms and legs akimbo in a dramatic dance. How could this explosion of creativity, triggered by sheer absurdity, bubble up from such a dark place? I chuckled heartily, but was quickly pulled back to the moment, aware that we had to keep the humorous momentum alive throughout the night. If we were going to press our delight in the face of Karen's antics, it would require a coordinated effort, like a workplace team-building exercise gone awry. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted Karen as she entered, or rather, stormed, into the room like a storm cloud gathering ominous intent. My heart raced with a mix of anticipation, and dare I say, revenge. She scanned the room, her sharp eyes already calculating and assessing. Thank goodness Lena had warned me about her tendencies to lurk, because I was ready for this. Armed with a cupcake in one hand and optimistic strategies in the other, I whispered to my comrades, "All right, the time is now. Remember, cupcakes are our shields." The giggles swirled about the table, fueling our chosen collective defense against this high-handed heroine of ours. As the evening progressed, more neighbors arrived, and the atmosphere gradually swelled from collective suspicion to frivolity-laden camaraderie. Lena took her cue to stir things up further by suggesting a toast to everyone's health, leading the group into a spirited cheer while I situated Ethan strategically by the devilishly decorated insulin awareness table. The cupcakes, adorned with insulin syringes made from candy, were an instant hit, much to the chagrin of Karen, who had cornered several neighbors deep in conversation, no doubt trying to establish her version of events and undermine our exploits under the table of seemingly harmless baked goods. Little did she know that her reach was constantly being undermined by the sugary bribes being distributed en masse. When we're done here, we ought to do some cleanup the Karen way. Let's see if she calls the potluck police on us, I whispered to Lena, who echoed my sarcasm with a smile. I would pay to see her ever roll at that. It was at that moment, amidst our plotting and laughter, that Karen decided to venture our way, no doubt smelling of entitlement stronger than her floral perfume. Gripping her plate of gluten-free quinoa salad, let's be real, the woman was ready for battle. She approached with thinly veiled resentment, written clearly on her face. "What's all this then?" she boomed, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife destined to spoil a cake. Her glare swept across the posters, the kids, and Ethan, who looked up at her with wide eyes, appreciating the theater of it all. "Well, Karen," I said, delighting in the irony of it all, "we've gathered here tonight to showcase the importance of education around insulin replacements. You've inspired us, truly," stifling a laugh as I motioned toward the frosted pastries. The other parents, then realizing the absurdity of the situation, slowly turned to watch Karen's reaction while stifling their own giggles. And in that perfect moment, the universe aligned so that life's ultimate comedy would play out right before our eyes. Karen's frown deepened as she realized she was standing, quite literally, in a condescending dessert scrum she'd inadvertently rallied against. Just like that, the mood shifted in our community center, reminders of our united stand against entitlement, whispering sweetly through the air. Suddenly, it wasn't just a potluck anymore. It was our collective stand against the outrageousness that plagued our neighborhood, all fueled by a righteous dose of humor and a good amount of potato salad. Because who could ever fight entitlement better than with a spatula in hand and laughter in the air? Just wait until the evening unfolded further, and this sleepless void of laughter erupted exponentially, challenging the tyranny of Karen in ways she had never previously imagined. Was her day of reckoning right around the corner? As Karen's perplexed frown transformed into an exaggerated glare, I could hardly contain my chuckles at the tableau we'd set before her, a well-intended chaos wrapped in laughter and cupcakes. The eyes of our neighbors flicked from me to her, and I felt the unmistakable thrill of a team united against the dubious meddler in our midst. "Education around insulin replacements," I repeated with a flourish worthy of a Broadway star. Our onlookers leaned in, like a reality show live tweet, and I was the unintended hero of this sparkling comedy. It was refreshing to see the shift. This was our moment to bask in the glow of camaraderie. Even Ethan, his fingers smudged with frosting, grinned up at me as if to say, "Could this get any better?" Emboldened by my impromptu bravado, Lena seized the moment, clasping her hands and acting as if she were presenting a TED Talk on diabetes advocacy. "Did you know, Karen," she began, her voice cheeky but filled with genuine concern, "that substituting insulin for, well, anything, let alone water, could endanger lives?" The room erupted with laughter, while Karen gaped, her meticulously maintained posture vulnerable under Lena's sardonic parenting demonstration. The other parents rallied behind us, murmurs of agreement weaving through the gatherings. And just like that, we had possession of the moral high ground. I squeezed Ethan's shoulder, waving toward our makeshift banner, as we celebrated the absurdity with our cupcake-armored celebration of righteous indignation. Suddenly, as if summoned by the very essence of our shenanigans, Karen stepped forward, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, words tangling in pursuit of something to grasp onto amid the delightful chaos. "This is absolutely unacceptable," she practically screamed, her voice ricocheting off the walls like oversized balloons in a crowded car. It felt less like a confrontation and more like an audition for an over-the-top drama. "You all have to stop this nonsense right now," she continued, glaring daggers at Lena and me. Watching the fury paint her cheeks red, I was half tempted to wave a miniature flag that read, "Team Insulin," but opted for some discretion instead. Clearly, we were stirring the bee's nest, and shutdown wasn't an option. "Oh, Karen," I exclaimed, adopting a mock-serious tone that drew more giggles from the crowd. "We're just helping spread awareness about healthy choices. Your suggestion of water as a substitute was so enlightening." The laughter crescendoed, filling every corner of the community center until even the snacks seemed to giggle back at her. But Karen, relentless in her pursuit for control, charged right on. "You people are utterly clueless. This is why children are so entitled today." A horrendous gasp from one of the other mothers evoked the response of a B-rated horror film audience, as if Karen had just announced the apocalyptic arrival of the apocalypse. Half the attendees were shaking their heads to mimic denial, while a couple of the bravest chimed in, "You mean children deserve choices, right?" At this point, my son, ever a partner in crime, bounded to my side, visibly charged by the magnificence of his dad's ridiculous rebellion. "Karen, your quinoa salad can't save you now," he declared with the utmost theatricality, followed by a dramatic hand wave that could rival a Broadway exit. I had to bite my lip in disbelief. My little one was supporting my ridiculous antics with such wholesome enthusiasm. The energy in the room shifted yet again. It wasn't just sheer laughter. It was a gathering storm of empowerment. It was all at once hilarious and incredibly bonding, forging tenuous alliances in our tight-knit community against the mundanity of entitlement. In the midst of the joyful chaos, my eyes caught sight of Karen attempting to reorient herself, a constant whirlpool of indecision nested within that furrowed brow. I couldn't help but laugh again at how a bunch of delicious treats and a sprinkle of rebellion had ignited the spirit of the neighborhood. It wasn't merely about defending our kids and their health anymore. It was about creating a community, a band of merry misfits united against absurdity. "Let's go, team," I declared, launching toward the snack table, arm pumping like the team captain I fancied myself to be. "Join hands, snack gals and guys. It's time for the group Insulin High Five and Vanilla Pudding Co-op." As I scanned the rapidly filling room, faces lit with delight, laughter in abundance, and even a new lightness in Karen's demeanor. Albeit begrudging, I marveled at how ridiculous our night had turned. This was the kind of rebellion I could get behind, one born from joy, unity, and cupcakes, topped with a sprinkle of sweet absurdity. So what would tomorrow hold for us? Would there be federal charges, swirling around like autumn leaves in an October breeze? I grinned, making a mental note to scrape together a Google Docs presentation alongside our artwork by the end of the week. After all, there were twists in the future so tantalizing, I had to know what more could possibly be thrown our way. As the night progressed, our community center became the nucleus of sheer delight and spirited rebellion. With the air thickened by laughter and whimsical camaraderie, I reveled in the absurdity of it all, feeling like the ringmaster of a circus filled with cupcake-smuggling clowns. One by one, parents stepped forward, sharing their own stories of worry and frustration about Karen and her incessant meddling, each tale punctuated by exaggerated hand gestures and rounds of laughter. "Remember when she tried to convince us that gluten was causing climate change?" a dad shouted, the hilarity rippling through the crowd like a slapstick comedy routine. I couldn't help but join in, pumping my fists in mock outrage. If gluten could cause climate change, I'd be building a spaceship right now. The atmosphere transformed into an interactive theater, every parent sharing their bizarre encounters like urban legends of suburban warfare. Meanwhile, Karen stood there, an island of bewildered indignation amidst our throng of joyous mischief makers. The camera crews had honed in on her every fuming expression, which seemed to grow more incredulous with each biting comment thrown her way. "You're just jealous," she flailed, her voice booming, yet lacking authority as it ricocheted off the walls, much like those novelty rubber chickens kids wielded back in the day. The surrounding parents let out a crescendo of simulated gasps, turning to one another with exaggerated expressions of shock, their eyes wide as saucers, enough to rival a cartoon character in its most panicked state. I couldn't help but smile. It was like watching a perfectly scripted farce unfold, except nobody had provided a script. In the midst of this delightful chaos, Ethan, energized by the electric atmosphere, decided to take it one step further. He grabbed a nearby cupcake, expertly decorated with a smiley face, and maneuvered it like a baseball, pitching it right toward Karen. Not to hit her, he wasn't aiming for the crown jewels or anything, but to prove a point. "Hey, Karen," he called out, "think fast." The room collectively gasped, one eye twitching in suspense while the other focused straight on her. Karen, in her fit of righteousness, barely had time to react, and all of a sudden, she stumbled backwards, gasping, while the cupcake sailing through the air missed her by mere inches. The crowd erupted into uproarious laughter. If this were a sitcom, the laugh track would have been deafening. Of course, that cupcake was as innocuous a projectile as they came, but Karen somehow seized the moment, as if I'd just launched a season finale cliffhanger. "This is the behavior I'm talking about," she shouted, regaining her footing with an emphasis that belied her dispensable dignity. "This is chaos. This wildness is why kids today." But we weren't listening anymore. No, we were savoring the sweet taste of victory, our unified response an anthem of rebellion against her oppressive antics. Someone shouted, "Chaos is the new normal," fueling the frenzy, and soon we were grouping up to give our own rallying cries. "Weird is the new cool," and "Sugar-coated justice deserves its day." Who knew that teamwork made the absurd absurder? Amid all this jubilant insanity, Lena stepped forward with the kind of grace that only a nursing hero could muster. She brought with her a stack of papers, reports, and brochures about diabetes management and the importance of proper insulin usage, the very documents that Karen had swept under the rug in her desperate quest to be innovative. "Let's integrate education into our cupcake-fueled revelries," she cheered, waving the papers like a flag of liberation. The crowd cheered in approval, and her impromptu pitch turned into an engaging presentation that had parents nodding earnestly, some even taking notes. "We demand innovation in education, not in dangerous peddling of quackery," she added, her voice soaring higher with every word. The room was electric, and I had to hand it to Lena. Her ability to stand firm against Karen's chaos was a weapon deserving of a spotlight. As the evening drew to a conclusion and laughter continued to bounce off the walls, I realized that it wasn't just cupcakes and spirited remarks uniting us against Karen. It was a profound sense of community, the sweet knowledge that while we faced absurd challenges, we could band together to ensure a safe, supportive enclave for our kids. Everyone was operating under the banner of, "We've had enough," I chuckled, hanging back as I gazed over the assembly, a gathering of friends and neighbors, faces flushed with joy, hearts buoyed by shared purpose. This community was no mere collection of houses. We were a gusty wind racing against entitlement, and a fitting reminder that together we could face even the most absurd situations that life threw our way. And as my raucous neighbors began preparing to leave, with their bowls of cupcake remnants and laughter still echoing through the halls, I couldn't help but feel gleefully victorious. Because after all this mayhem, Karen had earned herself a seat at a table, one not filled with cupcakes and camaraderie, but perhaps one filled with the Federal Bureau of Unfortunate Decisions. Who knew that chaos could be so deliciously empowering? I grinned at Ethan, who still seemed glazed over from the high-drama antics of the evening. What a night indeed. But as we packed up, I pondered one last thing. What misadventures will Karen's antics bring us next time? Maybe it's time we prepare ourselves for another round of delightful chaos. Thanks for tuning into this insane entitled Karen story. If you're craving more wild Karen showdowns, check out our video on the right. Or if you trust YouTube's instincts, pick the one on the left. Whichever you choose, brace yourself. There's plenty more meltdown madness where today's story came from.